So I arrived in New York, spent a couple of days in Manhattan. Right, there's New York. Then flew to Montana, specifically Bozeman, and then went from there to Big Sky, where I met Lisa. Then after spectacular scenery, lots of snow, then went from Bozeman to Los Angeles, and then just south of LA to Irvine with Lisa. The original plan was actually to go from Bozeman to Boise, which is where the Lori Vallow case was, but changed my mind. Spent a couple of days in Irvine, then flew to Boise via San Jose, and then spent quite a long time in Boise. Got an Airbnb. Spent probably 2 weeks there. While I was there, headed to Jackson Hole, and then on the way back went to, it's not on this map, but went to Rexburg, and then on another weekend went up to Moscow. That's also not on this map. Then when I was done covering there's a couple of different things. I'd been covering the Lori Vallow case, but also I'd arranged to meet Terry in Seattle. Flew to, and Terry had a very limited amount of time that she was available. So flew out to Seattle, met Terry in Seattle. Two of us traveled down that famous 101 highway. The redwoods are sort of in this area. One of the biggest organisms in the world is here. It's like a fungus and mushrooms. Funnily enough, if you just keep going, where's Utah? You go over here, St. George, there is a big forest that's also one of the biggest organisms. Anyway, then ended the trip at Sacramento. Then my friend Webb picked me up here. We went to San Francisco, and then Napa, and then San Francisco, and then through the night drove down to Thousand Oaks, which is north of LA. Spent about a week there, then headed, where did I go from there? Then I drove from there into Arizona, and hired a car, drove into Arizona, stayed in Flagstaff. From Flagstaff to Moab, stayed in Moab quite a long time, probably around about a week to 10 days. Then came back some of the same way, went through Monument Valley, came fairly close to Las Vegas, but then headed up past St. George. This is where Lori and Chad's affair basically started, where they met. It was preparing a people conference here. While I was there, while I was in this area, there was a triathlon that weekend. Headed up to Salt Lake City, and basically past this biggest aspen forest, or this aspen forest that is one of the biggest organisms in the world. Okay, well, Brianna says this feels like a recording. Well, it's a recording until this point. So I'm going to take you through the first sort of moment. So this isn't like a tourist journey. This is a journey through the true crime fabric. And I actually wanted to go through around about 21 different settings, and there just definitely wasn't time to edit all that and put it all together. So I'm only going to go through about 4 or 5. If you guys are enjoying this or you find it useful, I can maybe do a part 2. Thanks a lot, by the way, Liesel, and also thanks so much to Christina. Thanks a lot for that. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start off with just going a little bit deeper than this sort of superficial quick journey. We're going to go into that nomadic static video shot outside Salt Lake City. Are you guys ready for that? Just minimize that and maximize that, and see if you recognize this. Okay, now I want you to focus on this area in the background, the profile of these mountains, right? And that's something that I was focusing on. You might think it's not really. So what? They went to the Bonneville salt flats. It's got nothing to do with true crime. It did have something to do with Gabby's journey with Brian. They went into sort of the middle of nowhere. It's quite a lonely place. And what did they make of it, kind of thing, right? And so this is what I made of it.
If you look carefully out there, there's like a thin grey line, and on that line, traffic is moving. You can hear it slightly.
Let's just stop for a second. I'm aware that your votes aren't going through. The votes were put up about 24 hours ago. So, how I understand it is if the poll is older than 24 hours, it expires, right? So, that's what's going on. So, I understand that you can't vote, but the votes are in. So, that's kind of the situation. Okay, can we can we continue?
Moving this way and that way, like a causeway. So that's the one side. What this road here is the road to the Bonneville salt flats. I thought it would do that. Um, I've kind of enjoyed this vehicle, but does this ring a bell? Look at the mountain in the background, right? Does that ring a bell in terms of remember where Gabby Petito recorded? Remember where Gabby Petito recorded those aerial shots of her vehicle? Well, wasn't it somewhere here where the vehicle went out into the pan and then the they got those sort of aerial shots, and you could sort of see tracks around that. Wasn't that done perhaps somewhere around here? So I'll zoom in. Does that ring a bell? So the last time I did this, I was standing on a frozen lake under the shadow of the Grand Tetons. I was surrounded by white as well. This is salt, not snow, obviously. It's a much harsh environment, this, a far more lifeless environment. You do have endless space, and it's quite weird if you look in the distance there, you see that little gathering of people, and they're just doing what I'm doing, just sort of walking on this. It's almost like a large blank sheet of paper, and it's just like human curiosity. There's nothing here, just you. So what do you do with that? How do you think about that? Somewhere else you go, there's something there, and you, I guess, deal with that and you do something with that. But here, there's really nothing to do except put yourself up against this canvas. And of course, one thing that does change, which can be quite beautiful, is the light. When the sun sets, this turns sort of a golden color, and the the mountain range behind me also sort of kind of glows. But beyond that, it's just a lot of nothing. Quiet and peaceful, though you do hear the sounds of motors far away. And people do come here to race. But anyway, this is the site, I think, where Gabby and Brian did their last little bit of photography for their for their YouTube, for that YouTube.
Now, if we look at that, um, background. You can see it's a lot clearer in their video, although it's also not that clear. Well, I was unfortunate to have Canadian wildfires smoking up the place, but I think where they actually were further. Um, what's the word? Like I was further out in order to get these mountains tucked behind these mountains here, tucked behind those mountains. I think I was a bit further out, and I needed to go a little bit further in, but it was basically the same area. And I kind of wanted to. It's not like a crime scene, certainly, but it's part of the fabric of the Gabby Petito story. And I'd also written magazine articles about our salt flats are also used for, I'm not sure what they call it, high speed racing or land speed records. We've got the same thing. And so I was also just sort of curious just to see. And so that's kind of what I was tuning into. But I mean, the point, the observational point is sort of, can you see that in the background there? Can you see that profile? And now look, take note of that profile in the background where I'm standing.
YouTube video. In fact, isn't it the cover image for the YouTube video? And then of course Brian went back to Florida, and Gabby was alone, and that is a moment, an opportunity for Gabby to perhaps rethink what she was doing, rethink what was happening. I suppose a setting like this, where you just really you, and you just bring who you are into the setting. It's a chance also, I guess, to recalibrate, to say, to cast off what you don't want. I mean,
So I don't know if you can see in the background over there, that's actually snow on the mountains on the top there. So I found it really pretty amazing. You can stand there with a t-shirt and it's quite cool, and snow in the mountains, and there was snow in other mountains as well. I didn't realize it, but I was chewing up valuable time making this video. This wasn't really part of what I meant to do that morning. I was sort of on my way away and on my way to the airport, and I thought, look, I think I've got a few thoughts in my mind, and I'll just take 5 minutes and just make this video. And it ended up being 8 minutes, and every minute ended up counting on the drive back to Salt Lake City. I barely caught my flight. It was one of the closest sort of touch and go scenarios. I kind of also had to go slightly over the speed limit just to win back a minute here and win back a minute there. So this was actually critical time that I was using to make this video. You could also argue wasting. So yeah, when I think of this, I think, geez, maybe you shouldn't have done that. Maybe you should have just gone straight to the airport. But anyway, now that I'm back home, it's quite nice to actually have this footage.
I mean, I was just packing my luggage for flight. What do I want to keep taking with me, and what do I not want? I've got a couple of books that I haven't read a single page from. Do I really want to keep dragging those with me? So what's going on in your life? Things that you should maybe let go of, and things that you could maybe appreciate more as well. So maybe, you look at this environment of nothing. What do you have that's worth holding on to? What do you have that maybe it's time to let go of? It's quite funny. I was watching Fury Road in my hotel room, kind of over my shoulder while I was working. and I don't know. It's a similar setting to this. It was actually filmed in Namibia instead of Australia because of weather that wasn't playing along. But what's interesting is also in that movie, it just talks about hope can be a curse if it's unreasonable or irrational, or hope can kill you. A fairy tale can kill you. Something we talk a lot about in true crime. And this is this is sort of a stark reality out here, you know. And the crazy thing is that people do come here and they race their machines on you. It's almost turning this scary environment, you know, it's like the surface of the moon, into a place for fun and games, a place to make noise, a place to show off, a place to, you know, you also have Burning Man. But I mean, that's really it, is you decide what to do with the blank page of life. But also, you've got a landscape in front of you, whatever it is, and you decide how you're going to illustrate it, what you're going to do with it. Is it going to be a party? Is it going to be a funeral? Is it going to be realistic? Or are you going to, you know, what you're going to do with it? And so this is, as I say, part of the fabric that that Gabby and Brian saw towards the end of their journey. You know, this was August. This was when Gabby had 2 weeks left to live.
So I'm not sure if you caught the thing in Fury Road, kind of near the end of it. The male character says something along the lines of, "Hope can," how did you put it? Something like hope can kill you. You know, if it's unrealistic, hoping in something that's not going to happen can actually be fatal. And if you think about Gabby Petito, at this point, this was after the Moab incident, right? So the Moab incident had happened, and then she kind of stayed in a hotel. And what do you think she was thinking at that point? The Moab incident had happened. Brian had actually struck her, face was actually bleeding, and Brian had actually left her. He'd gone to Florida. What do you think she was thinking? What do you think he was thinking? Because ultimately, what happened is he joined her. He came back into the story, and the two of them went from this part, Salt Lake City, to the Grand Tetons, and that's where she died. That's where Hope died, for probably for Brian, and then Brian's hope also died ultimately. I mean, Brian was also having an unrealistic hope in the sense that, I don't know, whatever he was hoping was going to happen with Gabby turned out to be unrealistic as well. And as interesting as that story is, I think one's also got to turn it back to you and say, what are you hoping for? Are you realistic about it? You might not die, but you might lose a lot of money, or you might lose a lot of time, or you might lose a lot of what else is there? Money, time. I don't know. You might lose something, and so it is something worth, I think, thinking about. And so I was having this fairly profound thought while the clock was ticking out on my situation, and I was about to almost like have disaster. Like I probably caught about, I don't know, 15 flights. Could it have been that much? And this was the flight I came the closest to missing. Bear in mind, I'm driving to airports that I've never driven to before. I'm navigating airports that I've never been in before. The Salt Lake City airport's got quite a long section. I remember the lady, ticketing lady, said, "You're going to need to walk about a mile." It's a bit of an exaggeration, but to get to the terminal, you've got a long way to go. And so every time, you know, you've got to go to another terminal, Anyway, so that's basically just the thought that arose in this part of the fabric in at this point in my journey, and this was something I at the time just uploaded to members only videos.
Anyway, I've enjoyed this vehicle, even though it was my first choice. I'm gonna head back to the airport now, and see you guys later.
Okay, so that's that. And now we go back to this. Okay, so now we're going to go into the sort of the next stage of this journey, which is Denver, right? Just see if I can move this along slightly. Don't want to move it too far. Okay, so now we're going to deal with, I flew from Salt Lake City Airport to Denver. I was now making my way from west to east, consistently west to east, and then ultimately end up in New York and then fly back to South Africa. And so part of that journey was ticking off a couple of cases that I'd covered, including JonBenet Ramsey. I think I've written 11 books on the JonBenet Ramsey case. The very first one is this one, right? The Craven Silence, which I co-wrote with Lisa. And so, yeah, I mean, I feel like I've got X-ray vision for that particular home and Boulder. And so just so strange going to Boulder and just sort of feeling like I'd been there before. I sort of felt like I knew where everything was, and it was just and I felt that way in many parts of America, where I sort of feel, wow, I feel like I've been here before. I know around the corner is that, and around, if you go back that way, blah, blah, blah. And so when I went to Denver, I stayed in Boulder. One of the first things I did is I ate at a Pastor Joe's. It was really good, but pretty expensive. So now I'm going to take you through the visit to 749 15th Street in Boulder, Colorado. So I went there with someone. I was sort of in someone's company, and basically just sort of trying to just quietly get a sense of the home now, but also the home then. And it's obviously there's this passage of time, right? And yeah, so it was just it was important to try to get the angle on this side, and because I had an idea that a bat was possibly thrown out of this window, right? This is by the way, this is Burke Ramsey's room originally, and these windows were actually open at the time. I don't know if you guys can see this. These windows were open, and we actually kind of thought that the place was I don't know, abandoned. It just seemed like you can see all of these weeds growing, but it could also just have been. Did you read the ransom note to the South Patio door? No. But yeah, one of the things I didn't want to look at was you very seldom see this view. And I actually returned to the house after this day by myself. and I wanted to sort of just go a little bit further along to get the side long view, just a better shot of it. And but then the neighbor was actually right there when I was in. I was thinking of asking her, "Do you mind if I?" And I guess she would have said, "Yes, I do mind." But anyway, so it's both side views of the house are quite important, and this is the one side view. One bat was sort of lying over here, sort of a teal covered bat, sort of lying right here. And I think there were two other bats, and they were lying sort of somewhere else. But I always wondered, was it a bat that fell out the window that made that sound on the cement that the neighbors heard? And yeah, so that was certainly the thinking. Okay, so let's have a look at another picture. So from this angle, the Ramsey's bedroom, I think, was up here, you know, the very top floor. Someone said, compared to other homes, did it stick out more? It's surrounded by trees, so it's in a way it stuck out the least. Like it's almost like when you drive up the road, there's like a forest somewhere, and that's where the Ramsey home is. One thing that surprised me was that the house is on quite a steep road. It's not on a flat road. There's quite a steep road going up, and if you turn right at that road, it takes you up another steep road which goes up to the Flatirons, and it's really not far from quite a big park. And if you think about it, you know, if JonBenet had just run off, wouldn't she have gone to the park, which is just around the corner? And of course, the Ramseys insisted that she hadn't done that. Well, how would they know? You know, she'd just been given a bicycle for Christmas. Couldn't she have gone somewhere on a bicycle? I mean, that didn't even come up. Anyway. So I found it quite ironic that just on the outside of this home, you have these Christmas lights. I mean, the Ramsey story is a Christmas story, and right on the outside of this house, you had, you know, Christmas lights, and I don't think that was to communicate anything. I think there's students living in here, and that was just how they, you know, decorate the house. But I personally found it kind of ironic. There's a sort of a close-up shot of those lights. Those aren't just lights. Those are Christmas lights that you tend to put on a Christmas tree, right? So in the previous image, you get an idea of just how many windows are in this house. You know, we've seen the Ramsey home before, but when you're standing there, you really appreciate that almost this entire elevation from the one side to the other, right? Not talking about the front of it, the side, especially this side. Basically, glass, 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 glass on all sides, glass everywhere. And obviously, the house didn't look anything like this in 1996. You didn't have any of these trees in the way, And so anybody running around at night would be visible through these windows, right? And so in a way, it's sort of no wonder that something was going on in the basement. And it does make you wonder, the person who wrote the ransom note, where did they write that in order to not be seen? You know, someone at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, whatever, why is there a light on? One wonders where that ransom note was written. Was it written in the basement? It's a question that's not often asked. Maybe it was written in the kitchen. The kitchen's on the other side of the house. There are less windows there, but there are also windows there. Would you take the risk of writing a ransom note next to a window above the ground? I don't know. I don't know if you would. What does Cotton Star say? Was the neighbor at Scott Gibbons' house? I'm a little bit embarrassed to say this. I'm not quite sure which house was Scott Gibbons. I think, are you saying on the, if you're looking at the house from the front on the right-hand side, I think that was Scott Gibbons' house. I'm not 100% sure, but it was the neighbor when you're looking at the house on the right-hand side. Hope that helps. So when we stopped in front of this sign, there were some kids on the lawn, and they said, "Are you lost?" And I said, "No, definitely I'm not lost." And I just sort of wondered, did you, how can I put it? Do you not know why we're here? Or do you know we're here and you're kind of being snarky? You know, I sort of wondered what the situation was. But there did seem to be a sense of amnesia in Boulder. I didn't speak to a lot of people, but you kind of got the feeling that especially young people have put it out of their minds, and their parents have maybe encouraged that. Let's have a look at some other comments. Yeah, the right side, okay.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they've seen it before. Oh, haven't they? Really? Like the lady next to me in Pastor Jay's, I was like, you know about the JonBenet Ramsey? She was like, what? What's that? And she was not young. Anyway.
Stuff like that, doesn't it?
So what is often underappreciated with the JonBenet Ramsey house is that there is kind of an alleyway going down the back. And certainly if you were an intruder, that would be maybe the better way to approach the house and also to enter and exit. And I'd be interested to know, is that the way that the housekeeper normally came in? Just out of curiosity. But there definitely is quite a like the road in front of the house is very ordinary thoroughfare, you know, but the road behind it is kind of an alleyway, and it's just a idiosyncratic to Boulder to have this quite you know, there's no street lighting over it. It's very narrow, and so I'm not quite sure if I've got footage of that here, but let's have a look. So in well, I just missed it. Can I take it back? So this is the Ramsey parents' original bedroom. It's quite a huge room. It's the third floor of the house. And then basically below that was JonBenet Ramsey's room, and then the playroom I think was sort of around this area, and then Burke's room was here. So there was a Burke's room, a room in between, and then JonBenet's room. So that's it. I haven't provided. I mean, I've got a lot more photos, but I mean, we're already half an hour through this. We're going to now go to Chris Watt's home, the 2825 Saratoga Trail. So what was quite strange about this was how little change this house was. I don't know if you remember, the lawn had turned grey, sort of what's the word, yellow, and now it's just back to green. But the house, that no one had even bothered to change the outside of the house, same colors, everything. No one had changed even the number, and you can actually see some children's chalk writing over there. Yeah, and so when we came around, Laurie and I, for another sort of look, the garage was actually completely open, and so we just had a look inside the garage. I'm not sure if I've got that in this footage, but let's have a look. By the way, can you see that is the Trinastich camera over there? It's there, but it's really small. It's a really small little camera. If we go back slightly, it's going to let me go back slightly. So you kind of get the idea that, I mean, this is kind of what Chris Watts did. He parked like this, and he thought that these trees are obviously bigger now than what they were, but he obviously counted on there being enough visual interference to that camera, right? There's a sign here. I thought it might be a for sale sign. It's actually not. It's just a normal sign. But there you kind of get a sense of the view from there to there. You don't often see this sort of angle. And there it is. There's the view from there to there. And you can see the camera's actually oriented onto this driveway, right? The camera is obviously oriented over here, and yet it could see peripherally that way. And who knows what Chris Watts imagined. Maybe he thought he would be just out of the peripheral vision of this camera. Well, was he right? Okay, so I'm going to do a little test of your what's the word? Your perception skills. What is a very important clue to the Chris Watts case that's right in front of you while we're driving? Like what should you have noticed that was going on while we were driving around it? Let's see if you guys can answer that. So that's 100% right. So when we didn't just go to the Watts home, we went all over the neighborhood, and there was actively garbage collection taking place, and it was kind of quite loud and quite obvious. You know, there's a truck moving around, and so I said to Laurie, what day is it? And she said it's Tuesday. And then I asked someone that was sort of walking by, I said, is garbage collection usually on a Tuesday? And they said, yes, it is. Well, guess what day it was when Chris Watts did the sermon on the porch. It was a Tuesday Tuesday afternoon or whatever, and I think there was still a storm and it blew over the garbage cans. But the point is, when Chris Watts returned from Survey 319, right? Is that right? Survey 319. He didn't come straight back. He went to Black Mesa Road, and he apparently put something into the garbage there. And so he knew that he didn't really have to do anything in a way the garbage would be gone. You didn't have to go somewhere. It would be kind of taken away through remote control, right? Bear in mind, he also had put the garbage in the kitchen garbage. And I guess he was counting on that garbage also being taken away Tuesday, except the police intercepted it. Do you remember that? Where's Timmy? Timmy's in my room sleeping. It is quite late. It's 11:30 here at night. So that was quite interesting just to see that psychology within the fabric. That was definitely quite interesting. But anyway, thanks a lot for that, Gina Gonzalez. Black Mesa. This is the road that he came down. It is quite an obscure road. I think I want to quickly park.
She's laying the groundwork for emotion.
That road closed. So what was quite interesting with this little diversion was we parked over here. Can you see there's a little meter there? It's just almost out of picture. And we were just sort of sniffing around here. And I was just thinking, you know, when we covered the Chris Watts case, you sort of saw them. They seem to be rapidly developing this development. You know, you saw Shanann's early videos showing the development. And then I was just surprised to sort of be here a year later, 2 years later, and some aspects of the development just had not expanded. And if you look beyond this road closed sign, there's like miles and miles of field that's just not developed. And I was quite surprised at that, right? And I just sort of wondered, and I sort of said to Laurie, I wonder why they're not developing this land. I mean, it's there, what's going on, kind of thing. Any thoughts on that from you guys?
Okay, commit.
So this was the garbage disposal that, as I say, was actively doing its thing while we were there. And yeah, just definitely made you think about Chris Watts committing the crime when he did, and also thinking that he could count on the garbage disposal to get rid of evidence. So one of the questions that we can ask is, for example, what happened to the girls' blankies, right? And what did happen to them? Were they ever found? I think it's quite an interesting question. Let's look at some of your comments. Raul says large-scale master plan communities can take over a decade to build out. Yeah, but there's no construction taking place there right now, like zero. Silent Murmur says they may not be developing it due to the tripled cost and how mortgage rates are too high for most people to afford. That's possible, but we were thinking that it's due to something else. Le Petit says, I'm from Denver. The area was once farmland, grazing land. The problem is access to water. Okay. Would have to review the real estate market. Okay. Lauren says the audio is a bit muffled on my end. Sorry about that. Thanks a lot, Julie. Okay, so let's keep going through this.
That's the pool. Okay, you can hit stop.
So we had quite an interesting conversation, Laurie and I, about would you want to live here? The fabric of that housing estate was on the surface quite attractive. It seemed you saw a lot of little kids running around. It seemed very almost like a cookie cutter neighborhood, and on the surface, it sort of looked like the sort of place you might want to live. However, um, the conversation we were having was are these houses, how can I put it? Are these houses overpriced? Like the house from the outside looks quite expensive. But is it actually kind of overpriced? And we were just having that conversation. And then another conversation we were having was to do with, would you be comfortable living right next to these, what do they call them? Is it pumping jacks? I used to know all of this stuff off the top of my head, but would you want to, would it not bother you to sort of be at fairly close quarters to gas pipes and all that kind of thing? And anyway, we had quite an interesting conversation about that. By the way, this stone that I've got here comes from that neck of the woods, this round stone.
And then I'm going to just reverse out again.
So this was approaching the house from the rear.
Oh, hey, Pop.
Actually amazing that they haven't even changed the color of it. Okay, I'm going to reverse. Look this way. Is it on?
It's on.
No, it's not on 5. Just put it on 5. Okay.
So I think on this drive-by, the garage was open, which was definitely quite
Yes,
interesting.
I hope that garage is still open.
Because the question was, had they changed anything inside the house? Nothing was changed outside.
Slow down. Slow.
Had anything been changed
slow.
inside?
Mary.
And it turned out that it had. I'm not actually sure if you can see from this angle that there was a change. We could see it. We could see it. There were some sort of pictures on the wall. Not sure if we go back there again, if there's a sort of zoomed in. Another thing that we spoke about that was definitely quite interesting was this sculpture or whatever you want to call it when you come into Frederick. It's this whole idea that extraction and mining is part of what this community is built on. You know, it's like, we're so happy that you're digging into the ground and whatever. And I thought it was quite a clever marketing thing to have this part of the logo where you sort of say, yeah, you know, it's this is who we are. But I mean, is it really what you'd want on your doorstep? So overall, what I found kind of very interesting and ironic, like this this episode and this analysis is kind of taking you through the American fabric. So if you voted fabric, you're 100% right. One of the most interesting fabrics, but kind of in a somewhat disturbing way, is the fabric surrounding or the fabric within which the Watts family lived. Because as I say, it really looked like this fairy tale. You know, when it was covered in the news, it was like this American family, white picket fence, the perfect family in the perfect home. And when you scratch the surface, you kind of got a different sense of that. And so I just going there myself in person was just really interesting, revisiting some of those thoughts and some of those ideas. I think this is a maple tree, and what's quite interesting with this maple tree, I could be wrong, but what's quite interesting with this maple tree is when it is spring, its leaves turn sort of yellow and red and then green. It's kind of like the inversion of what trees normally do. You know, it's usually in spring they turn green and then and small little buds turn green and then they turn red or yellow in fall. Well, this particular tree, when it is spring, the leaves come out sort of red and yellow and then turn green. I just sort of found that kind of inversion also very ironic. You know, if I'd known about it, I probably would have added it to the narratives that I wrote about that even the trees have got like a strange, you know, there's this strange aspect to them. So this is let me ask you guys, do you know what you're looking at here? Do you know where Laurie and I went? Your footage of this has given a different view of it, to be honest. It really wasn't all roses as shown on the news. So she says, I just live in an area where I walk to town and go home in the woods, but they are close. Okay. Money can't buy intelligence. Okay. Okay. Any other comments? Cookie cutter neighborhoods are populated by middle upper class, middle income young families. I find them sterile. Most of these families will stay in the bubble, safe in their own minds. One of the places I visited that was pretty cookie cutter, but I don't know, maybe that's the wrong term. I found Irvine very manicured, and I found it a beautiful neighborhood. And some people might say, I don't like it because it's cookie cutter. I liked it because it was so taken care of. But like, I thought that's like a legitimately beautiful neighborhood, but probably pretty expensive to live in. So this was obviously the Mad Dog, right? And there is the um, it's not Mad Dog. What is it? It's a something dog. Sorry, I'm a little bit sleepy. So there's the salmon that Chris Watts ordered for, I think, $24.25, right? Lazy dog, right? I wonder where my lazy dog is. Do you want me to call him? So anyway, that is, we ate there. We found it surprisingly good. We outstayed a lot of the people who were there. It was really an enjoyable meal, enjoyable atmosphere. Yeah, just pretty good. I really had a good time with Laurie, just getting to know the neighborhood. So thanks very much. Thank you. So, Durkan says, I like Dirty Dog. Okay. So where did I go after this? So I'm now sort of in this area, actually north, sort of Denver's here. I think Boulder is somewhere around Denver, and then Frederick is, I think, somewhere around there. I actually um, went to the Great Sand Dunes, which is also where Chris Watts and Gabby Petito went. So I didn't just go to sort of crime scene, what's the word, ground zeros. I sort of also went to the fabric, right? I was just trying to get a sense of it. And one thing that was really interesting with my trip through America was how often you passed a water tower in this town and that town and that town. And some water towers are part of the media footage, and some water towers aren't. I mean, the most famous one, I guess, is the University of Idaho. And another one is to some extent, the water tower in Hampton, South Carolina. But I mean, there were water towers all over the place. There's one in Rexburg, there's one in Delphi. It was just interesting seeing similar things in the fabric in different places. For me, our water towers look quite different to those. So I'm not going to take you to the Great Sand Dunes. I took some amazing photos there, but instead I'm going to take you to Delphi, Indiana. So that's one of those water towers I was referring to. I'm quite sure why this music's playing. That's the water tower as you come into Delphi. So what is something that you hopefully notice just looking out the window here? So you with me in the vehicle. What do you notice just looking out the vehicle? This is the same river that the Manon High Bridge crosses. And so just in terms of the river, what do you notice like at the outset? Zircon, we do have water towers. They just don't look like yours. They look very different. No, not lots of greenery. Not lots of greenery. I guess it's quite difficult to see, perhaps from that angle. Susan's on the right track. Have another look. Look over the bridge and tell me what you see. So Mel's right, but I think Mel is seeing the members only video. Christina says it looks shallow and narrow. Yeah, Lorraine, you're right, low water level. And Susan also. So what's quite interesting here, and it's a very interesting conversation because you, on the one hand, you can say, wow, and you can see it. If I take myself away here, you can see there that it's quite shallow. And if I had to get out my vehicle and I could easily just walk across the stream, and it wouldn't be at its most, at its deepest, it wouldn't really be deeper than sort of knee deep, I would say. But it's a respectable argument to say, yeah, but so many years ago, the river didn't quite look like that. So you could argue that it had silted up by now, or whatever, and that is quite a good argument. But I think it is also a good point to make that the river is surprisingly shallow. So like that, just that idea, when you go into the fabric of the Delphi case, just the depth of the river is quite an interesting conversation. Because on the one hand, you can say, I mean, I thought the river was quite deep when I first started researching and investigating the case, and Lisa Wilson said to me, you know what, the crime scene is on the other side of that river, blah 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 blah. And I thought that doesn't make any sense, but when you think that the river's not that deep, then it kind of can make sense, right? So the interesting thing is that when you go there in person, like right now today, it's really shallow. You can, I mean, I had my shoes on. I didn't even take my shoes off. Basically walking ankle deep, right along the river's course, right? And even if it was deeper than that at the time that the crime was committed, I don't think it was substantially deeper. But there is some footage of the investigators walking sort of side by side, and they seem to be quite deep in the water, almost like chest deep. The bottom line though is, didn't the perpetrator and the two victims cross somewhere that was shallow? So you might say there's sections of the river that are extremely deep or whatever. Yeah, but aren't there also sections that weren't? And so just that is quite an interesting conversation. And you tend to have that conversation if you went there and you saw how shallow it was, if that makes sense. To me, people want to see you, they don't want to see me. By the way, thanks a lot to Deborah. You've got to walk your doggies. Winnie and Nelson. Hope you thought it was good. Thanks a lot, Elise. Timmy, just come say hello quick. For those of you who haven't seen, this is Timmy wearing his what's it? Sorry, I'm a little bit off today. his Indiana Jones outfit. So yeah, he's looking quite spiffy. Do you want to lie back and relax? We're going to put your aeroplane sheet back, Jimmy. Okay. Yeah, that's Indiana Jones. Okay, so let's have a look at some more. This was another surprise. This is what the bridge looks like today. See what I mean by shallow? So obviously what you're seeing in this image is, you know, late spring, early summer, and it's not at all what it looked like at the time. But what is similar, of course, is the railway track. And, you know, I must admit, although I'd come all this way, and I was tempted to walk on the bridge. I felt a little afraid to do so. I sort of thought, well, they must have gotten rid of the first section because it had rotted or was falling apart. And you know, I sort of thought, and right over there, I don't know if you guys can see right over there, sort of the second or third sleeper seems to be in like an advanced state of crumbling and decay, and the one next to it isn't looking too good either. And of course, there are no railings to hold on to. And I was quite surprised to sort of feel like I didn't want to walk on this bridge. You know, sort of felt it's going to be quite precarious. As much as I wanted to walk on it, I also felt like I'm, you know, and nobody else was walking on it either. So I was actually surprised that there were no signs saying um, no entry or don't walk on the bridge or whatever. So I did, when I left, I thought maybe I should at least try and walk, you know, a couple of feet. But then I also thought, what would be the point? You know, what would be the point in getting to the end? And then I thought, well, there would be a point. But anyway, ultimately, I didn't go. Instead, I went down the underside, and I did go quite far along the river under the bridge, which is where the girls ultimately went. They walked off the side of the bridge, down the hill, and then crossed the river. So you can't help thinking when you see this forest, and also if you know the case, you can't help thinking, well, the perpetrator didn't seem too worried about being seen. And what I mean is, like, the better time, if you're going to commit this crime, the better time to commit it would have been in summer, when the trees would provide visual shielding. And so you kind of got the sense that he seemed less concerned about being seen, like in terms of the trees. Like, he didn't seem to be worried that because the trees are almost like, you know, they don't have any leaves, so you can almost see right through them. And so that was just a thought that occurred to me. But the other side is this area's got very, very steep ravines. And so I don't think the visual shielding would be coming from the trees. It would be coming from the sort of the lie of the land. Like if you stripped all the trees away, where the crime was committed was sort of topographically concealed, if that makes sense. And so not only would the topography provide visual shielding, but also to some extent audio shielding, if that makes sense. It would muffle whatever sounds are made. And bear in mind, we are dealing with a situation where potentially there were 1 or 2 gunshots. And so the question then arises, could they have been heard? Would they have been heard? Were there gunshots? Also screams, you know, could those have been heard? And I guess one could do sound tests. Another thing that was quite interesting was because the water was relatively shallow, and because there's quite a lot of water moving over rocks, there's kind of a shushing of water, which kind of has a muffling effect in terms of you don't like have dead silence. You've got that muffling noise, and if you go far enough away from the bridge, you've got like quite loud noise of the highway, which is also kind of another noise. And so you kind of got to think about things like the sound coming from a crime like this. It's not coming to you horizontally. It's coming, you are quite high up, especially if you're on the bridge or on the hiking path. But if you're not on the bridge, the sound is like almost in a hole. And is the sound going to travel effectively out of that sort of ravine thing? And I think that is quite an interesting observation to make, again, when you're within that fabric, if that makes sense. I think kids did go there often in the good old days. Rado says, I heard walking the bridge was kind of a rite of passage. So, yeah, there I was actually standing in the middle of the river in that picture. So something that's really quite curious is the number on this bench is 1967. And isn't that the same number on the mailbox of Richard Allen's home? Isn't it 1967? I'm not actually sure if I've got pictures of his home here. Let's see. So that's obviously where Richard Allen worked, right? I just want to see if I can bring up pictures of his home. Just quickly go out and minimize this. I mean, I know what I think. I just want to make sure. See if we can find it. Delphi. Yeah, so there it is. So it just really is quite bizarre that the number on his mailbox is 1967, and the number on that class bench is also 1967. And so one wonders whether that had some kind of psychological significance where it sort of made him think something, you know. It just certainly is kind of weird. Okay, so I'm not. I think we going from here. We're going to go to Moselle. I think Moselle is next.
Then flew from Salt Lake City to Denver. That's quite a hectic flight. Catching it and I think getting from the airport to Boulder. I was in Denver, Boulder for how long was it? About 4 days. Went to the Great Sand Dunes. Anyway, flew from Denver all the way across to Indianapolis, went to Delphi, and then also Alexandria, which is where the Morphews grew up, Barry and Suzanne, and also attended the Indy 500 briefly. Then flew from Indianapolis to Charlotte in North Carolina, stayed in a executive suite of the Hilton there. That was quite a cool moment. Then drove all the way down through South Carolina into Georgia, stayed in Savannah, and then spent a little bit of time driving to Beaufort and Moselle and Crocketville and all of those sort of areas around here. Also where Mallory Beach died is a sort of area. By the way, Hilton Head Island is where Buster Murdaugh lives. Then I drove from around about Hunter's Island to all the way back to Charlotte. I stayed another night in that same Hilton hotel, then flew from Charlotte back to New York, and then spent a couple of more days in Manhattan, went to the Statue of Liberty, and also the site of the World Trade Center.
So does anyone know what the significance is of Bamberg? Does anyone know, is there anyone here who knows the Murdaugh case, and do you know what the significance is of Bamberg? Let's see what you guys say. Plant Lady says, I bet you loved that suite. I've never stayed in a suite like that. I did love it, and I'd never stayed in a suite like that either. So yeah, it was pretty good. Raul says a lot of folks attend the Indy 500. Well, it was my first time. It was quite cool. Yeah, there you go. Well done, Christina. Christina, you seem to be very know what's going on. So well done. Silent Murmur says, you may have noticed that in the US, everything is far more overpriced than everywhere else in the world. Well, it's a lot more expensive than where I'm from. But anyway, here was another water tower. And if you were following me on Instagram, you would have seen a couple of photos of that as well. A lot of churches just all over, like you're driving and then right out of, like, you're driving in the south and there's just forest, and there's a church here, church there, church there. And I mean, there's like no town next to the church, just a church in the middle of nowhere. Quite interesting. I had a little bit of an epiphany here, and you know, some people didn't like what I said, but I definitely found this experience quite interesting. So at one point, I passed this sign, "Welcome to Beaufort Country," sorry, Beaufort County. And actually, what happened was I saw this sign, and I'm very much a sign guy. I love taking photos of signs, and anyway, and so I'd actually driven all the way past it, and then there was nowhere to park, so I drove quite a long way past the sign. And then I kind of thought, you know what, I can't leave that sign. I'm going to have to park and walk all the way back, even if it's a long walk. And this is a really busy road, and so I was walking along the road, and I didn't really want to walk over here because the grass was may not look very long, but the grass was a little bit long and also sloping downward. So I kind of felt like I would rather walk kind of on the road, right? So just think about the situation here. There's provision for someone to walk there if they want to, but I didn't really want to. I'd prefer to walk on the road. But the problem was that the road was busy. And so I would sort of walk on the grass. And then eventually I just felt like, you know what, although it's a little bit dangerous, I'm going to walk on the road instead. And if a car comes, I'll just step off. But then as it got further and further, I kind of just got sort of like, well, you know, the car's not going to knock me over. I'm just going to walk here. There is this white line here. And when I got back in my vehicle and I drove back, I thought, I wonder whether any of that psychology is what Stephen Smith may have been thinking. I wonder whether he also felt after a while, you know, it's a little bit tiring and difficult and troublesome, you know, because we tend to think about it in a very snapshot way. You know, was he walking, and you think of it like in 5 seconds, but walking a long distance becomes something that is tiring. It doesn't matter how fit you are. And it is more tiring walking on grass, and grass that is sloping, than on road, right? And another way to think about it is, if someone said to you, jog 5 kilometers or jog 10 kilometers, and you can decide either you must jog on the road or you must jog on the grass, but you can't do both. You must only do one. Which one would you do? You can kind of see how there'd be a bit of a dilemma there. And so anyway, I thought that was also just an interesting thought process that would only really occur to you to that extent in the fabric when you were there. So some people thought, I really don't know why you're even thinking that, because I think something else. So can you recognize that? That is the, I think it's the Arches Creek Bridge. But this is the bridge where poor Mallory Beach lost her life. I was actually trying to find the specific pylon that was damaged, but I think the damage is on the side away from this side. I actually saw recently, I think it was on Court TV, a brief image of that particular pylon, and it's a round pylon, so it's one of these. And but again, what was quite interesting being in situ was kind of just thinking to yourself, am I on the right side of the bridge? Meaning, is it this side of the bridge, that side of the bridge, or is it on the other side of the bridge? And it's thinking like that, orienting yourself, that you tend to do less when you a keyboard warrior. When you actually there, you've got to, you know, obviously get it right. And so when I actually originally parked by the bridge, I parked on the right-hand side and I approached it on the wrong side. And then I kind of I didn't Google it. I just sort of thought to myself, let me try and remember. And then I did remember correctly. It was the left side when you looking at the bridge from the front. And obviously the water, I think, was quite a bit higher. So something that was a little bit strange was when I went to Delphi and I went to the bridge, there was like virtually zero acknowledgement or sign of what had happened to Abby and Libby. You know, there was like no acknowledgement. And having come from Boulder, I thought, is this the right way? Like, I can understand folks in true crime saying blah blah blah, but beyond the folks in true crime, is this the right way for America to deal with things like this? Should you not acknowledge them? Should you take the little toys and throw them away or whatever? Should you acknowledge it? Should you not acknowledge it? What should you do? And so when I was at this bridge and I saw this little flower here, I personally felt good about it. I thought, you know, someone is thinking about her, someone has acknowledged her, right? And that was something that I carried with me through America, was how should we deal with some of these high profile traumas and tears in the fabric of society. And you know, you look at the Ramsey house and there's this attempt to cover the house with trees and kind of hide the house away, right? And then you go to Frederick and there's no attempt to do that whatsoever, where you'd almost feel, jeepers, maybe you should at least put a different coat of paint on the house, kind of thing. Maybe you should try and change the house in some way. And so what should you do? Should you change something in some way, or should you not change anything? You know, what is the sort of answer? I just found that whole sort of internal monologue quite interesting. The thing is, no, it's not a sunflower. I think it's a plastic flower. But someone said we should definitely acknowledge it. The thing to also bear in mind is it's easy to say that if you don't live there, if it's not your neighborhood, if you're not the neighbor. And you know, it was quite strange going to the Ramsey home, encountering the neighbor, and kind of getting the sense of, like, you kind of want to put up your hand and say, you know what, I've come all the way from South Africa. I've specifically come here, and you know what, I've written all these books about it, and there's some very urgent questions regarding X, Y, and Z, and dot dot dot, and you kind of want to say, you know, haven't you thought about that? Don't you have questions? And you kind of get the sense of, no, I don't have questions. I don't want to ask any questions. I don't want to think about it. It's like, you've come here, you know, like you've come to this place and you know the story inside out, and the person who lives right next to it doesn't want to know about the story. And do they have that right? And also, is that right? And I just find that dichotomy interesting, a little bit disturbing. But how does one deal with that? And part of that is, how does that tear in the fabric of society, how do you heal that? Do you heal that by constantly sort of tugging on it? Do you heal that by forgetting about it? Do you heal that by talking about it? Do you heal that by talking about it and then forgetting about it? Like, what do you do? So something else that is definitely quite interesting with this case, for me, some other people don't find it that interesting, but if you think about Mallory Beach, although the incident occurred, she was like instantly missing. So the incident occurred, they knew when it occurred, how it occurred, where it occurred, right? And then and they started looking for her kind of immediately, and they couldn't find her for a week, right? And then you say, why was that? And also, is that how long it takes to find someone in a tidal river situation, right? And then, but all I'm trying to say is, you've got somebody who's in a boat, and they know exactly where something happened, when something happened, how something happened, everything. They've got all of that information. They've got witnesses, right? And then they still can't find her. It's not like she went swimming off, or, and it still took a week to find her. And then you think about Nicola Bulley, and it's also a tidal river situation. You think, is it very strange that it takes a certain amount of time to find someone when you've got a river that is not just flowing in one direction, but sort of flushing this way and that, right? Is that a factor in the Nicola Bulley thing? And again, just you're in the fabric of a real river. And that was something I also found quite interesting going through America. America's a country blessed with water. I come from a country where there's very little water, and you don't often drive along rivers. Here and there you do, but it was amazing being in Montana and being in Idaho and being in Colorado and being all over the place. And there are rivers all over the place. In South Africa, there are not that many rivers. You cross it once and then you never see it again. And there's so many rivers that are sort of dry. And so, it was just interesting seeing a river like this one, and then thinking about the Nicola Bulley case that is fairly recent. So another sort of question is, did these, I'm not sure what you call them, pilings, did these have any impact on the boat incident? It seems to be directing traffic between them, but did Paul try and dodge one of these, and then that, caused the accident? The other thing that's quite interesting is Alec Murdaugh's got to do a deposition very soon on the boat incident. It's a civil case, and so apparently he's being deposed, I think, next week or something like that. The other thing about this bridge, when you stand and you look under the bridge, it's quite a complicated bridge in terms of under the bridge. It's got a lot of, it's like a cage in a way. It's got a lot of things, and when you look down the bridge, you kind of think, if it was daytime, would you even know how to get through this bridge? Because there's so many sort of pillars going down, right? And so in a way, it's actually not surprising that at night that someone came to harm, because even if you were sober, it would be quite tricky going through that sort of cage work of this bridge at night. And that's also something you maybe don't think about if you weren't there. So let's go back a little bit and look at it again. I tend to agree with that. But just looking at the bridge, can you decide where you should go through? If you've got a boat, where would you want to go through? The pillars also come down sort of at angles, right? Sasha, in South Africa, we say Beaufort. In America, it's apparently Beaufort. So I am aware of that situation. Okay, so actually, I think I got some names wrong. This is where I met Laurie and Morgan, and had a really good meeting. This is where Paul had his late night, you know, water. Not it was like a late night watering hole visit, and I think it was only him and Connor that went inside, and the others were sort of on the swing. And yeah, it was anyway, we had a really good. I photographed the bridge, and then I met them over here.
Just trying to think what it is.
So did that ring a bell? Did that little scene ring a bell? So these are the cameras that recorded them walking along this section. So I think that appeared in what is it? The Prince of Tides, the house that was just cut off a moment ago. So this was the area that they walked along, but the house that you see right after this was part of the Prince of Tides, that one. So now we're going to go to Moselle, I think. So the video surveillance is that camera right there. So another kind of interesting question when you at Moselle is, why did Alex Murdaugh go out the main front gate? Why didn't he go out the side entrance or the side exit, which is where the dog kennels were? In other words, why not sort of go out a sort of secluded exit, right? And it's just a thought that occurs to you because you stand in front of the main gate and you see another exit just down the road, right? And again, that is what happens when you in the fabric, you see obvious things like that and you ask obvious questions, right? Why did he come out of this main gate and go back through this main gate on the night of the murders? Why not go through the other gate? Wouldn't that have been a better option? Because you've got to open and close this gate, and there's a road right here. Why would you do that? Yeah, I think that's a good good argument. Something else that was quite surprising was there's no fence over here. Like, if someone really wanted to, I mean, it says no trespassing, but there's actually no barrier here besides these trees right next to the. That was something I didn't expect. And so, if you're making the argument that someone had a grudge based on the boat incident, someone had a grudge and they then wanted to get onto the property, well, they would be able to get onto the property. So that in a way is quite a clever story in that sense. Yeah, obviously the signs were put up after the fact, yes. Yeah, Lauren, when I was standing there with some other people, I was thinking, I wish we had a drone. Of course, someone did come there with a drone. So can you see in the distance there? Um, so I'm standing right in front of the gate. Can you see in the distance there? There's another access right there. Can you see that? So if you couldn't see it, I'm going to take you right there. That's the other access. It's literally just down the road. And what I'm saying is if you're going to open the gate, then you wouldn't be seen from the road. You could open the gate and not be seen from the road. And then there are some houses here on the left-hand side. So one of the things I try and do in this sort of situation is try and do you recognize this picture? Do you recognize the gate there and the this is the I don't want to say the inside of Moselle, but some of the structures that we recognize from Moselle, the kennels over here, right? But what I try and do is you've seen some images over and over and over again, but you just want to get a little bit of perspective. What are you actually looking at? And so that's why I've taken this picture, the one after this, to show what it looks like when you look just to the right of that, which you don't often see. Right, that picture. That picture is kind of giving you a perspective, right? And so one possible reason why Alex Murdaugh didn't exit here is because there's a house right there. That's one possible reason. On the other hand, was this house inhabited at the time? And you can imagine if there were a bunch of gunshots and someone was here, well, surely they would have heard it. Did I know the Moselle property is on both sides of that road? I did know, but I only knew that fairly recently. So, but well done on that as well. Thanks a lot, baby boss. So the thing that I'm trying to do with some of this footage, but especially this, is take you right to the scene, so you feel like you're right there. And so you see the rust on that pole. You get a lovely sense of perspective that you're standing right there with me and seeing what you can see. And so, that was one of the things I wanted to do when I was in America. The Murdaugh case obviously isn't over yet. It's quite a lot of litigation still remains. So there's Hampton, the town where the law firm is situated. It's also very close to Moselle and also not far from Sandy Run Road, right? So that was my next stop. The park, it's called the Parker Law Group. And there it is from the back entrance. We know that some of the friends of Paul would go in there and get a couple of drinks or whatever when they were youngsters. And Maggie would go and visit Alex quite often. I think they'd have lunch together. I was quite surprised that it wasn't so big. In photographs, it looked big and imposing, and when you were actually there, it seemed it's not a small building, but it wasn't as big as I imagined it to be. Timmy's having a dream. I was fortunate to capture the building in the late afternoon light when it's that sort of golden color. I do wonder whether they've had difficulties with their clients. The news around all of this, whether it's affected their business. I do wonder about that. Okay, so I think from here we're going to go to the railway line. Well, so it's first to the courthouse. And this is very close to Memorial Day weekend. Yeah, formerly PMPED. Anyone know what the significance is of going to the railway track? Why would I want to go to the railway track? So there's the Hampton water tower with a watermelon on it. So anyone know why I would want to go to this railway track? And any thoughts on that? Christina, let's hear it. Sherry says, I think the building looks huge. Sherry says the railway tracks is where it all started. I kind of think so as well. I also think that's possible. That the great grandfather, the patriarch of the Murdaughs, died on a railway track, and the family sued the railway company, and that was how the Murdaughs' fortune started. And so the question is, was that by accident or by design? And so that definitely is an interesting question. I don't know exactly where it happened. I don't know exactly where it happened. So this was going to the Stephen Smith accident scene. And I don't know if you noticed in that footage, not only is the road turning right at this point, but it also sort of dips down. The road doesn't only turn, it turns and dips. And yeah, so it's also interesting being there and driving on that actual road. Okay, so how many sort of crime scenes have we dealt with so far? I think it's, is it 4 or 5? You might say that wasn't a crime scene, but I basically mean sort of separate fabrics. I'm not sure if it's 4 or 5, but we're going to deal with one more to go. And that's in New York. So let me ask you guys, what if you've been following my channel, what crimes do you think are situated in New York, off the top of your head? Crimes that I've sort of covered on this channel. Stephanie, good to see you. So 9/11 is actually one that I haven't covered, right? So this was on my way to the World Trade Center, or the new, I think it's called the Freedom Tower now. And I don't quite know what happened. I caught an Uber, and the dude dropped me off with like 20 blocks to go. But it was actually quite a nice walk through the urban fabric of Lower Manhattan. And I really did notice how different Lower Manhattan was to Midtown Manhattan, which I've gotten to know quite well. And so, yeah, so I was there quite early in the morning. I'd actually had 1 hour's sleep, basically. And so I mean, when the guy dropped me off, I thought I was like around the corner from it, but it was like 20 blocks to go. And I ended up walking about more than 10 kilometers that day, basically about 6 in the morning and then another 4 in the afternoon. Thank goodness, with Stephanie L's help, we caught the subway back. Otherwise, I don't know. I'm not sure if I would have been able to walk when I was in the airport. So anyway, let's take it a little bit further. I don't know whether the Uber driver, what's the word, shysted me or whatever the word is, or whether I put the wrong thing in, but I'm pretty sure that I didn't. So I don't know. It's kind of bizarre. So, Zircon, I'm not going to give you my analysis of 911 right now, but I'm going to just show you some of the footage that I took. I've certainly thought about it. I've actually started, like not now. I had started a book about it, and I'd started doing quite a lot of research. And yeah, it is a very actually disturbing case, actually. And it's kind of, in a weird way, it's a very big crime in the middle of New York, almost in the heart of America. So, you might say, we should forget about crime and whatever. Well, look at what happened with 9/11. Should New Yorkers forget about that? Should Americans forget about that? Do we know what happened there? You know, and what happens when you do sort of forget about a crime? Does history repeat itself? So, I mean, I quite hastily put all of this together. And so basically, I'm just going to take you closer and closer to the scene of 9/11. And one thing that definitely that I definitely noticed was just how different the atmosphere and the architecture of Lower Manhattan was to Midtown Manhattan. And the question that then arises is that relevant? Is that relevant to 9/11? So what was quite interesting was on the way there was a little crime taking place. So I'm walking, kind of speed walking to the tower, and I hear this shouting, and I see this police cop stop in the middle of the road, and lights are on. Next thing, I turned around and sort of skidded, and I don't know if you can see it, but a scooter and a car had sort of collided, and there was a little ding about like the size of the roundness of your pinky on the door of this guy's SUV, and he was screaming and he was really angry, and you had like a huge police presence trying to deal with this serious crime in New York. I found it quite kind of amusing. So I kind of had two goals on this sortie to Lower Manhattan. The one was to go to the footprints of the Twin Towers, and it's quite strange. Although I'd been in New York quite a few days when I arrived, I'd not actually seen the Freedom Tower. And although I was aware of the whole thing, I just didn't really want to go there. I didn't really, I don't know. Then when I came back to New York and I was about to go back home, I sort of felt the same thing. I was aware of it, but I sort of was thinking, do I want to go there? And it was only when I went to the Statue of Liberty on a ferry that I actually saw the Freedom Tower for the first time. And then I thought, you know what, I actually think I will go there. And the crazy part was when I went there that morning, as I said, I only had 1 hour sleep and I got dropped off 20 blocks before, and it was quite a struggle to get there. The thing I wanted to do was go to those, the original sort of, I call them footprints of those two towers. And the other thing I just wanted to do was go to the Bull of Wall Street. And the crazy part was I couldn't do either of those things. When I got to where the Twin Towers were, they were cordoned off, and no one was allowed to go and like stand right there. So it was like the basic thing of what I wanted to do there, I couldn't do. Then when I went, I was running out of time now because I'd had very little sleep and I had to pack and I had to do this and that. When I went to Wall Street, I thought, well, I'll just walk down the length of Wall Street and I'll see the bull on the way, and I just didn't. And then I left. So the point of that whole thing, I didn't manage to tick either of those boxes. So I guess I'll have to go again. Maybe I need a guide next time. So it's just interesting seeing the level of CCTV, Big Brother is watching you at this at the site. It is quite a lot, not surprisingly. It seems like they'd had some kind of festival or party just before. And it's quite weird when I was taking this footage. Well, you had an aeroplane sort of flying by. Somebody told me that there's a lot of vacant office space in the world in this Freedom Tower, and I'm not an expert, but that looks like open offices. Like that looks open, 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 that looks open. Some of these look open as well. I don't know if they aren't, but they kind of look like it's like they're vacant. I don't know. Stephanie says, I was in New York City that day and watched the second tower fall from my terrace. Yeah, and so, I think it's one thing to sort of say, don't forget or whatever, but there's some people who literally have those scars in their minds, in their memories, in their, it's something that they actually witnessed. Stephanie says, a lot of vacancies, companies that made leases basically pay zero rent. So that's how close I got to the sort of footprint. You can see they seem to be cleaning them, but it was sort of cordoned off. Okay. Gina, do I have an email address? I do. I don't like to give it on my YouTube chat though. Can you not contact me on Instagram? Jazzy says that it'd be surreal. Stephanie says Condé Nast has multiple full floors in the building and pays no rent. I actually have written a little bit for Condé Nast GQ magazine, but it's obviously GQ here. Although I did deal with kind of international stories, Lance Armstrong, and what's that guy who wrote the book about calories in, calories out? But I'm not, but misfiring a little bit today. I'm not quite sure why. Silent Murmur says, it seems like sometimes if bad things happen to people we love, whether we were there to see it or not, we can block out the memories as a way of coping. Haven't you ever been in a relationship and then it doesn't end very well, and then many years later you sort of realize you have blocked it out? What's that movie, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, where Jim Carrey's character tries to actually go to someone. Can't remember if it's him and his girlfriend, or I think it's him. And then in the middle of having his memories erased, he's like, no, please. Actually, although it was horrible, I still want to keep those memories. It's actually quite a beautiful movie with Kate Winslet. PA Farm Girl says, I live close to Shanksville. Okay, yeah, that is quite scary. So I actually found it a very moving experience walking through the streets of New York quite early, and actually quite a pleasant experience. Although it's a big city, there's an intimate aspect to it. There's a beautiful artistic aspect to it as well. So I think that's basically it. So, like I say, I wanted to talk to you guys about 21 different places that I visited, but I've only done about 5. So I mean, it's not like this is as far as I went. This is as far as I'm going to go in this this session. So let's have a look here. So yeah, so the framework that I set up was basically this one. Boise for the Vallow trial, Jackson Hole, Wyoming, the Grand Tetons where Gabby Petito was buried, Rexburg, where where 2 children were buried in the back garden, Moscow, Idaho. I didn't really spend much time in Seattle, but that is where Amanda Knox lives. San Francisco, that's where Scott Peterson, well, that's where, what's her name, Lacey Peterson washed up. And then, yeah, so these are the 21 sites that I basically visited. Alec Baldwin, I mean, I was in New York. To be honest, I didn't actually think about Alec Baldwin until a little bit later. But I mean, Alec Baldwin lives in New York, and what's the word? Yeah, is basically that case is possibly not over yet. We'll see if it is. So the last thing I want to kind of leave you guys with, if this video is people pay attention to it, and if you guys want me to do cover the things that I haven't covered, I can do part 2. But I want to just share with you a couple of things that I haven't shared. So first of all, these tickets that I've got here, I don't know if you can you see them? Every single ticket here represents a day that I spent in the in court in the Lori Vallow case, and every single one of these tickets was quite hard to come by. You kind of you went into a website, you had to click on it, and if you did it, if you didn't, if you weren't if you didn't have your browser open, and you didn't sort of rapidly click on that particular what's the word, application, then within about the first minute, then you weren't going to be in court. You know, there was like this incredible pressure and competition, sorry, to get into the trial. And of course, I was staying at an Airbnb, and every time I went to court was a $10 Uber there and a $10 Uber back, and sometimes even more. And you know, my time there was also kind of limited, so I sort of wanted to really make the most of it. What was quite frustrating about being there was I sort of realized, even though I'd covered the Lori Vallow case previously, and I knew that it was basically being monopolized by, and I don't mean this in a bad way. I mean, it's a compliment to Nate Eaton and East Idaho News and the other people covering it. But basically, the people following the Lori Vallow case were basically, they were following who they were following. And so it was a little bit discouraging to go there, to go to all of that effort and get very little, there's very little attention for my efforts. And some of my patrons and supporters said, you know what, you should cut your losses and go and cover the Letitia Storr case. And I'd written a book about the Letitia Storr case, but the thing was, I personally found the Lori Vallow case very complicated, very interesting, and so I wanted to cover it, if that makes sense. And so I really wasn't in America to make money. In fact, I spent a heck of a lot of money to get from one place to another. And I often, wanted to do a live stream at the end of the day, and I was just so busy running around, I didn't even do it. That happened over and over and over again. What I also want to talk about is what is the reason why I went to America in the first place. But what kind of did it for me was sort of two things. The one was Gabby Petito. The picture you see behind me is a place called Canyonlands. It's very close to that arch where she and Brian were standing side by side, kind of embracing one another. That's Canyonlands. Canyonlands is not that far from the Arches National Park, and the Arches National Park is not that far from Moab. But I was just so impressed by how beautiful America was through Gabby Petito's journey. And so, I mean, that's another thing that I didn't cover in this analysis is I went to the Moab stop. It was very hard to get to because you're not allowed to park there. So, but I went to the Moab stop. I had to walk all the way there, stood there, took photos, got a sense of it. And also, it's so strange going to so many different places and feeling that they felt smaller or just different to what they seemed in photos. And that's so important to do, is to get a better sense of reality, a better sense of proportion. Thanks a lot, PA Farm Girl. Thanks very much. It is also part of the point of going to America was to meet you guys, and I met Elise in north of LA. That was really good, and also met Iceland. That was quite a surprise as well. That was it in the sort of Oregon area, and we went. We had a really amazing little day trip to like a lighthouse, quite a spectacular thing. Obviously, Stephanie H. and her husband. That was sort of how my trip started. We went to Central Park and to art galleries and whatnot. But the other thing, and then I met other people as well. But the other thing that really, besides Gabby Petito, the other thing that really made me think about America, like this is a real place. I know it sounds crazy. Like, of course it's real, but what just made it like hyper real was when we were covering the Kylie Rodney case, and you just saw how that reservoir was emptying, and you'd see someone go there and they'd dive into that reservoir. Remember that dude? And then one of my own patrons went there and she camped there and she drove there, and it really just made me think that's what I want to do. I also want to, I want to see these places. I don't want to just look at a photo. And so, what was quite amazing when I met Terry, she gave me this picture, this this missing thing, and I don't know, just that was also really meaningful because, in a way, just Kylie Rodney's spirit, in a way, like she was about to start her life, and she went to this get together, and then she kind of got lost, but she was sort of courageously about to begin her life, and I mean, because she went missing where she went missing, I kind of saw part of California that I didn't know about, and I thought I'd really like to see it. And the irony is that although I spent quite a lot of time in California, I kind of just raced past that section of it. And so it really meant a lot to me when, I mean, I didn't ask Terry to, as far as I can remember, I didn't ask Terry to keep one of these posters, but she did. And it was really just amazing to in a way connect to that case in that way. And another thing that you might think is you might think it's in bad taste, but Terry brought me little pieces of glass from that reservoir, and obviously opened this, and it's sort of, I don't know, pieces of glass from that vehicle, and again, you just kind of get that sense. Even though I was at this point, I was in America, and she sort of handed me this glass. It kind of brought home. It was almost like a heartbreaking moment. It brought home the reality of the Kylie Rodney case, and all of these other cases. When I went to, as I said, when I went to Frederick, I found this stone, and it looked like an egg, and so I picked it up and brought it home. This stone is sort of in the Bryce Canyon, Zion area. It's one of those sort of slightly orange stones. And so this stone makes me think a little bit of Gabby Petito. This one is from the Antelope Canyon. And it's got nothing to do with true crime. It's just something that meant something to me there, right? This was given to me by Laurie. It's a magazine, the National Enquirer, in pristine condition. It says here, Ramsey's changed their story about the murder night. But just like being able to hold a magazine like this, having written so many books about it, I've spent a heck of a lot of time covering different cases and trying to get to the reality of the cases, and nothing beats the actual reality, being there, right? And that's what I sort of try to do. And I wasn't trying to do that to, I wanted to understand it for me. I wanted to understand the fabric of America in terms of the true crime thing, but also just understand America, but also get to know America. And that is something that I've begun that process, and I'd like to do it again. I was very charmed by places like Moonflower Co-op. I was just thinking today I would love to go back there and just have a couple more meals there. They were so healthy and so delicious. So, does that, if you were wondering why did I go to America, it wasn't just to, it wasn't just to move through the true crime fabric. It was also to move through the American fabric, beyond the true crime fabric. It was also to move through the American fabric into the true crime fabric. So it's kind of from the one into the other, from the other into and back, right? And just because I want to have a deep psychological understanding of what I'm dealing with. It's just the kind of person that I am. And so it was a really amazing journey for me. It really was an amazing journey. Silent Murmur says, I love the co-op daily foods as well. Sounds good. So that is my journey. And I mean, here it is in a kind of in a nutshell. And I must say, when I drew this map, I kind of thought, wow, I went everywhere. I went, and while I was drawing it, I thought, actually, you didn't go to that state or that state or that state at all, or that state at all. And in that state, you only went to that one little town, right? And so I sort of feel like my journey to America has only just begun. Isn't there a song that goes, you've only just begun? Anyway. Stephanie says the bull was added in 1989, the year that I graduated. Okay, well, I need to go and find that bull. Brianna says, admit you want to move here. I've been speaking to some people about how much it is to rent, and like the rent in Manhattan is like $4,000. In California, it's like 3,000. In Connecticut, I think it's 2,000. If you go down South Carolina way, it's a little bit less. Anyway, I have thought about that. Okay. Anyway, so I'm going to wrap up now. Sherry says, thanks. I'm going to do some yard work. Okay. Katie says, dangerous to be alone with someone on a trip. Yeah. Lisa Wilson said to me, you know, if you're going to fly here from South Africa, you probably want to kind of, what do they call it? Cool your heels. You know, on the East Coast side, after such a long trip, you're going to want to, you know, cool your heels on the East Coast side, and maybe Vermont or Connecticut makes sense for that. I don't know. But yeah, I have been thinking about it, but yeah, I will see. Zircon says small towns, cheap rent. Wendy Martinez says, I was thinking the same thing. You're very much needed here in the US. Mary Beth says, please come back. Sherry, 1,500 North Carolina. Okay. Okay. Something else that I've been wanting to talk about, I thought I would talk about it in this live stream. Actually, this live stream went on at least half an hour longer than I thought it would. But something that I want to talk about is this idea of, should YouTubers go and visit crime scenes? Should everyone go and visit crime scenes? Should you know, like the house at 112 King Road? And you may have noticed I don't have that in this sort of presentation. I went there. I don't have it. I don't have it here. Thanks a lot, Chelsea. Thanks very much. Thanks a lot, Sherry. Maybe you must get in touch. One of the places I wanted to go to that I didn't was Myrtle Beach. I haven't been to Virginia. I didn't go to Florida. I didn't go to Louisiana. Didn't go to Texas. Summer Wells. Yeah. Do you guys know that the Summer Wells case is just past the 2-year anniversary? Pretty tragic. Yeah, and so in terms of the Moscow case, you know, when I actually went to Moscow, in fact, when I went to America, so when I first had the idea to go to America, I thought I'm going to cover the Laurie Vallow case. Oh, and Moscow's just up the road. That was kind of how it started. And then the Nicola Bully case happened, and then I really did get a sense of, I don't think I should actually go to Moscow. I don't even want to go to Moscow. But ultimately, because I was in Boise and I was so close by, and it was like the trial, I think there was one day where the trial had like a 3-day weekend. I sort of felt like it's kind of my job to do this. But when I was actually in Moscow, so I would go somewhere, take some photos, look around or whatever, and then I would just kind of be in my hotel room. There was like a jazz festival going on. I sort of felt like, how can I put it? I didn't want to disturb the peace, if I can put it that way. I mean, you could say, yeah, but you could just go and walk in the Arboretum, and I did do that. You can go and have a meal somewhere, and I did do that. But I'm just saying, I didn't sort of sniff around the whole time. I sort of did my thing, and then I sort of went back to my hotel room, and I just sort of felt like I felt a little bit uncomfortable being there, if that makes sense. I'm not a student, and I would imagine that they would feel not terribly happy having reporters and YouTubers and whatnot running around. And I was very painfully aware of that. And I wasn't like there telling everyone, hey, I'm in Moscow. I sort of thought, I need to see this for myself. And I will obviously put what I know and put what I've seen in my back pocket, and I'll use it at another point. But, you know, what I find you often see in these articles where they talk about the true crime circus or whatever, they'll talk about that like in one paragraph, and then they'll participate in it, you know, and you might say, well, yeah, but how are you different to that? Aren't you doing exactly the same thing? Well, I think my trip to America kind of shows the kind of thing I want to do. Is I want to see how some of these true crime cases are connected to the fabric of American society, like the JonBenet Ramsey case, right? And also how these places connect back into American society. And it was quite interesting when I met my friend Webb in California. You know, we were like traveling and we could go anywhere. And he said, do we want to go and look for dead bodies, or do we want to go to Universal Studios? Do you want to go and look at graveyards, or do you want to go to Hearst Castle? And he was kind of quite sort of cynical about it. And I kind of appreciated that, because it's true. You know, do you want to spend your day at a crime scene, or do you want to go hiking and feeling the sunshine and, you know, you're alive? Don't you want to enjoy that? And that is I think the very interesting journey that I was on, is acknowledging lives that were lost, but also acknowledging the life that's out there to be lived. And when I met many of my patrons and my supporters, I kind of got a sense through some of you of the sometimes the anxiety that you're dealing with, sometimes the loss that you're dealing with, sometimes the difficulty that you're dealing with, sometimes the trauma or whatever. But also, you and I, we were alive. And although we may have had difficulties, we still have our lives ahead of us. And so, you know, true crime may offer you a fortress of information that sort of reassures you that something is done about evil, for lack of a better word. But also, yeah, you can also just look towards the sunrise and, you know, head in that direction as well. And so in that sense, I also found it a very powerful journey for myself, going into these, going into the troublesome fabric, but then also coming out of it, going into another fabric of whatever, corruption, whatever, and then coming out of it. And I don't know, and so there's something in there that I would love to share with you guys, the joy of living, the you know, the beauty that is in our world. And that's what I sort of try to convey on Instagram. You know, those black and white American landscape photos. And I was saying to Stephanie L, you know, isn't there a possible movie in this whole idea that you journey towards something like that, and on the way you appreciate the gift of life, you know, on the way to trying to understand something dark that has happened, you see the light. And I don't know, who knows whether that story will see the light of day. Okay, so that's it from me. I did go to Hearst Castle. I've actually got a cap on the other side of my desk. We're under the same sky. Yeah. Wendy says, I love those black and white pictures. Yeah. I really did enjoy the photography side. And I think there's a lot more where that came from. Gina says, what's your Instagram profile? Let me bring it up. I don't actually have it on this computer. Don't actually have it. if you just search for that, you should hopefully find it. Okay. Okay. Anyway, thanks a lot, guys, for joining me. If you're watching this on replay, let me know in the comments if you'd like me to do a part 2, covering some of the places, because I covered about a quarter, maybe a third of the places that I actually went to. So if you want me to do a part 2, let me know. Thanks very much for the super chats, and thanks for a lot also for the interest and the comments from you guys. Been kind of feels like it's been quite a interesting conversation. Don't forget it's Father's Day tomorrow, so celebrate those dads in your life, even if it's a doggy dad. I'm not sure where Tim is, but yeah, don't forget about the dads. Okay, guys, take care, and I'll see you guys next time. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Okay, take care. Ciao.